Okay, let me just check if this works. Yeah. All right. I don't think anybody's here, but let's give this a bit of a shout out on Twitter that I'm live, and then let's see if there's anybody actually joining in. I'm going to give this a couple of seconds before I'm going to start some work. Oh, someone's here. Hello. Let me just see if I can actually, yeah. So hey, 2 people here. Do you actually see like the amount of people watching? Oh, there are already a bunch of people watching. All right, that's cool. I just get started then. Thanks for joining. I would not expect this. I've never done this before, so I think the idea is that I'm going to work a bit on TanStack query, which is what I had planned to do anyway in my Christmas holiday. So I'm still in the Christmas spirit. My audio is a bit low. Okay, that's bad. Is it really? Because I just tested it. It's the same one I had when I used when I was on Learn with Jason, and I can hear myself just fine if I unmute the Twitch stream. So unless everybody's having the same troubles, I think I'll just go ahead. The mic is right here. It's also on. So all right, perfect. So yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everyone, if you're also having a bit of time off from work, as I do. And my idea was to look into the issues we have on TanStack Query version 5. So let's take a look at the roadmap that we created together with the other maintainers. I think Arian is even here. He's our solid query maintainer. Thanks for joining. And we've looked at which issues we're going to do for version 5, what are the breaking changes. We had like a big round of discussions on it. And then we created this roadmap, which is a first draft, but I think it already covers a lot of the things that we wanted to do. And maybe there are more things coming, especially around infinite queries. But this is it for now. And as you can see, like I did not expect this at all. This is so great. First time I'm seeing this, that so many people jump in on open source and just tackle issues right from the get-go. So we can see like a lot of we've already have 2 closed issues, and a bunch of these other issues already have open pull requests. And that's just amazing. So I had to actually reserve an issue for myself to work on so that I can stream on it. And like there were a bunch of things that I wanted to tackle, which have been tackled by other people already, which is awesome. So I don't need to do them. I'm just looking at the PRs and reviewing them. So the thing that I had actually planned to work on is the expose custom cache feature. And we can just maybe look into this. We got inspired a bit by how SWR does it, and I took a look at SWR version 2, and they actually like have a very good API, I think, where you can pass in a custom cache. It's a cache provider on their end because it's a function, but what you can do is you can pass in your own provider into the top level config and then say, well, whatever I return here is going to be my cache, and as long as it conforms to this interface, which is pretty similar to what a map looks like, so it also says like it's a map-like object, then this will work as your cache internally. And right now in TanStack Query, we just have an object internally as our cache, and this is kind of where we store the key value pairs, key being the query key, the hashed query key, and the value being the query itself. But we don't actually expose this. And with this feature, we would give like control back to everybody else that calls it, and then they can do with whatever they want on it. And I'm not really sure yet what the actual features are that people are going to use this for. I have a rough idea, but not totally sure what I would personally use it for. In the examples that they have here is what you can do is that you can, for example, do local storage based persistent caching, which means that if you pass in a provider, you can just have a map that is like your cache, and you're reading the values in synchronously from local storage, and then you're actually having like an event listener that says when you leave the page, you're like just writing it back to local storage, and you return the map to do this. And this is fine. You could then probably do the same thing with TanStack query once we have this API, but we also have our persisters that do the same thing. So I'm not really sure if this would be a use case for TanStack query, but it's nice that you can do it. You can also, for example, very easily pre-fill the cache with this API. So you just create a new map, you put in some values, and then you return that map. So I really like this API that you can just have a function where you create the map and then return some stuff. Resetting cache between tests is an interesting case because you can just say, I want a new map every time. This kind of presumes that you are reusing the query client between tests, which is not something that I would do. But if you want that and it makes your setup easier, then this is definitely something you can also do, because every time when this when the test case renders, it will not share anything with a previous test or a separate test. So you don't need to have like a global query client that you would need to like clear between all the runs. So that's also possible then. And what I'm mostly like where this came from actually is a discussion about limiting the cache size, which is something that I think is interesting. It's not something that I've stumbled upon myself, but it's something that when you're working with limited storage, like maybe React Native, you would maybe want to say, okay, I want to store my data with an infinite cache time or with like a large cache time. But when the size gets too big, like when I have like, I don't know, 5 megabyte or whatever in my memory, then I just want to delete all the inactive queries. And this is not possible at the moment because we have a time-based cache. So my answer to this discussion was you can just set cache time to 0. That means that as soon as the queries unmount and become unused, they need to like be removed from the cache. And I think the active queries, like the things that you actively render on the screen, they need to be in memory anyways, right? So there's no point in removing them. And then the idea is that, yeah, you can, if you use this feature of custom implementation of the query cache to limit the size, what you can do is you can still keep unused data for a long time. Like cache should be retained as long as possible, even if the data is unused or stale. And then we just delete the inactive queries when the cache grows too big. And I think that's a nice idea. And I think you can you can implement this with this new custom cache API where we just give you back the object or like the function that produces the object or the map. And then you can do with this like whatever you want. You can decide how big this thing should grow. You can hook into the setter function and just delete old things or delete unused queries if it ever comes to that. So I think this would be possible with this API, and it shouldn't be too hard to implement. So I'm going to probably do that. Let me quickly read up in the chat if there's anything that I should, like, feel free to ask questions if you want. I'm just going to read them and maybe answer them. Love your work, thank you. Yep, under the hood, thanks for posting to my article. I am going to, we're going to look under the hood a little bit because I'm going to work on the query cache and stuff like that. So I hope this can also answer some of the questions. Info 5, is there going to convert from classes to functions? No, I don't think so. I've talked about this with Tana a little bit, and there is no good reason for us to do this. The classes are kind of convenient because you just define the class and you get back like the typings automatically without having to define the types of all the interfaces manually. And then you have a function and the state basically lives in the closure. The only real advantage of this, I think, is, well, first of all, I was surprised that React Query is built, like when I first saw React Query as a like library that provides hooks for React. It's actually written with classes. That was like, as a React developer initially, that was kind of weird, but it does make sense because it's not bound to React. It's just JavaScript, and in JavaScript and TypeScript, classes are a thing. So why not use them? They do provide the advantage that, as I said, you don't have to provide the types manually. With closures, like the values would live in the closure anyway. So I don't think there's any big runtime difference with those. And the only drawback is that they kind of minify badly, I think. Like, there is no tree shaking. That's also like the thing. But they compress very well. So when you like, if you take the bundle size and you compare it like just the minified size, it's a bit larger. But then when you look at gzip or broadly compression, it becomes like it compresses better than other things I've seen. So I'm not so much concerned about the bundle size. Tree shaking might be a thing, but then actually if you use the query client, everything is actually there anyways. And the other big thing is discoverability. So if we were to move to functions, you couldn't have a query client and then have like query client dot invalidate queries or query client dot set query data or something. You would have to, like, if you want a modular API with functions, what you would have to do is you would have to import invalidate queries from TanStack query, and then you would do something like, I could maybe just quickly like because I think this is interesting actually. We can have a look at this is the React query code base. Let me just quickly like finish the train of thought of what I think is why we're not doing this. So let's go to the query client, for example, just a file. But what I wanted to like point out is that if we're going to do this like with functions, what we would need to do is we would need something like import invalidate queries and use query client from and then add TanStack React query. Obviously this doesn't exist. And then what we would do is const use my, I don't know, hook. And then, whoops, you would have something like const query client is use query client, and then hey, that's actually correct. Yeah, const invalidate queries equals like either invalidate queries. Oops, there's something missing here. Or you would do like invalidate queries query client, and then basically like query key, and then to dos or whatever it is that you have. So you wouldn't have like this, or you would just call it like this, like invalidate queries, and then the first parameter is the query client, and then the second parameter would be the key that you want. As opposed to you just do query client, and then you can say query client dot, and then you get all like the auto completion invalidate queries and stuff like that, because it's an object where everything lives. And the moment you kind of like build an object that kind of contains all these functions, you can't tree shake them again anyways. And then you've kind of built like a class-like thing that isn't a class, but it's just an object with closures. And then you have the same thing just with having to do like the types manually. We do have some of those internally, but there isn't really, and unless I'm totally missing something, there isn't a real like big gain of going away from classes. Maybe for contributors, it's a bit weird if you start for the first time. But the size things are also going to get better in version 5. Because what we're going to do is, I can also quickly show this. If we go to the version 5, and then we have like this size improvements thing, is we are going to do two things. We're going to turn on JavaScript private class fields and class methods, especially for classes. Like, one of the things is that we have a lot of private things in our classes, but like for example here, the query client is private query cache, private mutation cache, private logger, things like that. But they aren't really private because this is just a TypeScript private, and they're not really like the JavaScript private. And then what you can do is you can use this like private syntax, right? But then this only works in newer browsers, and if you support the browsers that we support at the moment, this will actually like be worse because it creates more bundle size and it's also not as performant. Like if you look at the Babel output of the things that are going on when you use this is not really like very good. So we decided to wait with this until we can just up our supported browsers to like a version that actually supports this. So with the next version, what we're going to do is, and I've checked this in some Babel REPL. If we set our supported browsers to like this, then this will actually just work fine. And then if you go a bit lower, you will see that, well, this is all the output that's coming out, and this is like super ugly and also like not really performant probably. At least as far as I've seen. So once you only support like a bunch of browsers, then what you're getting is the output looks pretty much the same as the input. And then the minifier can actually come, or like I think Tersa can then actually go and like minify the names of the private class fields because they are really private at runtime. It's not like this pseudo TypeScript private. So they're really private. And then you can go and you can like rename like query cache to like something very short, because right now there are a bunch of things around that are just like this, everything that's this dot something actually stays like the same as the name in the output bundle, and that's why it gets larger. That's probably also why it compresses better, because like the long names are always the same in there. But still, I'm expecting a big, or a rather big shift down in bundle size once we do this. And what I really want to get to is below 10 kilobyte of min-zipped. If we go to bundle phobia, I mean, it's not the best tool, but and then we can look at TanStack React query. What we're seeing is 11.8K minified and gzipped, and I think with the current version, and I think we can go below 10 kilobyte. It would just read really well if it's like not a 2-digit number but just one, and people like small bundles, so it would be something that I personally don't care that much about, because I think it pays for itself. But yeah, other people care more about this, so we're going to do this. Questions. How do you get those end usage messages? Yeah, I'm using IntelliJ. So this is actually IntelliJ IDEA with the new beta optics. Something I've turned this on like a week ago, and I barely find myself like how this works, because everything looks completely different, and I don't have the shortcuts memorized as much as before. And yeah, it looks a bit different, but I think it looks actually pretty good. It looks a lot more like VS Code, I think. And it still has all the IntelliJ features, so where you have like the usages, and it just shows up where this is used. And then all the other things that I'm just used to working with, because I'm using IntelliJ for, I think, at least 10 years. And I've never tried VS Code. I think that's something I have to confess. Yes, we use rollup for the build process. So there is something like a rollup config, where we bundle all the packages, and I haven't written any of this. Thanks for anyone who has contributed to this, mostly Tanner. And then I think Arian has also done lots of things for solid query, and Damien has done lots of things for ES module support, our view query maintainer. So thank you everyone who's contributed to this. It wasn't me. Yeah, it's really, I don't know, 500 lines. I don't know. Yeah. Well, that's the part of the project that I don't want to open up that much. Okay. So let's take a look at the milestone and the cache issue that I wanted to work on. So this is the one, the expose custom cache one. Yeah. Okay, here it is. So the idea was to, when you create a query client, and this is something that might also be not that well known, when you create a query client, you can do it with like new query client, or you can also do it with, you can pass default, like an options object, and you can pass default options to it. I think that's what we're doing in the docs and in most of the example, where you can say, I want like all my queries to be stale for like the stale time to be 20 seconds generally, unless I override it somewhere. And that you can do with the default options. But you can also pass in a query cache and a mutation cache. And there you have to create a new query cache, which is our query cache class that we also expose, because the query client doesn't do much. It's just like, and we can also probably see this best in the code, that the query client doesn't do much except it holds the two caches. And then in the constructor, it's basically assigning whatever you passing to it, or it creates a new one in an empty state. So if you don't pass anything to it, it just creates a new one with an empty state. So apart from that, the query client doesn't really do much. It just has some like functions that are kind of utility wrappers around the query cache and the mutation cache, because when you call get query data on the query client, it actually just forwards it in a specific way to the query cache. And then all the functions like, that's a rather new one, but like get queries data or something, or fetch queries, they're all usually just wrappers around what the query cache is doing, or the mutation cache. So set query data also, it doesn't do that much. Usually you can like work with the query cache directly if you need to, by just doing use query client and then query client.get query cache. That's where like the real logic happens. So in the query client, apart from this massive amount of overloads that we're also going to get rid of in version 5, thankfully, most of the things are just like the implementation of these things is usually just a very small wrapper around things that work directly on the query cache. So what you can do is when you create a new query client, you pass a query cache to it. And here the idea is that we're also passing either a cache, or I haven't thought this through, like what they are doing, like have a function that creates a new provider. I'm not sure about the name, but the name we can always like change as long as we haven't released anything. So there are some use cases we've already talked about, and we have to just allow the custom cache to be passed in like this, or with a function. And then we have to rewrite the internal cache object. And that's what we're going to do first, I think, because this is just a refactoring. If I got this right. So if we open up this, so the query, that was the help, okay. The query client creates a query cache. So that's where we need to go, right? If we say new query client, then we let the users pass in a query cache, we have to go to the query cache. So the query cache basically also has a constructor, and then it has like, this is something that has, when I looked at this first for analyzing this issue, I thought, oh, this is nice, because there's another thing we can get rid of. We actually have the queries twice in here. We have a queries map, where we store like the query key. This is a query hash map. So this is just an object where the key is the query hash and the value is the actual query. And then, okay, we need to go to the query cache. And then we have queries, which is an array of queries. I was always thinking, why do we have this? Is this somewhat important? And the only thing that I could find out, this kind of predates me a little bit, but the only thing that I could find out is that we actually need the queries array for an order, like that we have the insertion order from the time when we created the queries. So every time when we take a look where the queries map is used, here they're both kind of like created. And then the queries map, here we are assigning like the query when we do add, and then we're also pushing it into the array, the same query. And then when we are removing it, we are also like filtering out the one from the array, and we are deleting it in the map. So they're always kind of in pairs. And then for the get access, so when we do like get query data or get or whatever it is that we can do, we just do a lookup in the map, because that's kind of efficient. We don't want to like iterate over the whole array every time. But when we do like get all, or when we do some find operation on it, we actually do this over the array, maybe so that we don't have to create an array on the fly, or so that when we have like the fuzzy matching and you're looking for the first value that matches, that we have like the insertion order. These are the only two things that come to my mind. But if we're using a map internally, I think both these problems kind of disappear, because a map it keeps the order of insertion, and you can just go with, I think you can create a new array with values over it. and you have like the iterator. So I think when we refactor this should be fine. We can just try this out, and like first of all we can try to run the test in here. Let's see if that if that kind of works. Let me just see if we can. Oh, that's package.json of an example. Okay, that's the wrong one. I want the top level package.json exactly, and there we can run the tests once. I hope like the tests are usually only flaky in CI. They're not flaky locally. So let's do test jest. Let's run this once in parallel on everything. I usually don't have the tests running in like in real time while I'm working on things. I just want to see that there's everything set up for me to work, and there's nothing really wrong with that. Boom. That's good. Yeah, these console errors, they're also going away with version 5. Like, I really hate it when tests have like error output that is actually expected. That is like not a good thing. It's just kind of, every time I look in CI for a failed test, I always stumble upon these, oh no, there's an error. So we kind of, like, this console error is kind of expected here, but we need to kind of get rid of it for the tests. Okay, cool, that works. How much time did it take for you to move around in this code base? Oh, did I freeze? No, I'm still here. Oh, but on Twitch, I'm not. Ooh. Okay. Huh. Okay, so now the whole stream is a bit behind, I can see. Okay. Interesting. Well, let me just reload that page. Let me just see. I hope that's okay when the test started. I'm not gonna do that again. Yeah, okay. That's fine, but I hope that I'm back now. Is that, let me just see if that's somewhat live, or, oh no, it's like super delayed. All right. I just keep going. I think the stream is still going. Yeah, it seems like it's, I don't know, 20 seconds delayed or something. But whatever, that works fine. I'm not going to start the test locally again. Maybe this just ate up too much of my memory. Let's see. Okay. So query client. Let me just close that here. Yeah, the question was, how much time did it take for me to move around comfortably in the code base? I don't think the code base is that huge, to be honest. The code, I mean, maybe for the amount of things that TanStack query does, it's, no, the other way around. I think TanStack query does a lot for like the amount of little code that it has. Most of our code is tests, and those kind of got me the longest to look at or to kind of get to know. So this was because like the way the tests were written was a bit new to me. So I had to, and I've also kind of rewritten a lot of the tests to work a bit more towards like how the user sees the app. So what we usually do when we write a test is we can also see this a bit later probably, is we are using, like, we're just rendering a page that has a use query, and then we're kind of interacting on the page with what happens. So there is actually, we don't even have React hooks testing library, I think. We're not having a single test for the hooks. We only have for like the React parts and the hooks, we only have tests that actually test components that use that hook, which I think is pretty nice. But the way the tests were written kind of got me a little bit to get into it. And the other things, it's basically, I think it's like 5 classes or something. It's the query client, the query cache, the mutation cache, and then query and mutation. I think I also have covered this in the Inside React Query article, where it's kind of like these 5 classes. And the query client is the largest one, I think, but the query client is so large because of all these overloads and all the things that it does. It looks like 700 lines of code, but it's actually, I think you can, if you take away all the TypeScript stuff, and if we get like, look at this fetch query, has like, I don't know, like this is all just type definitions for the 3 different overloads that we have, and then the implementation is maybe this, right? So that's not that much, and this will all shrink with the next version. So yeah, I think until I got comfortable like I'm now, I think this always gets better over time. I think the first 6 months or so I didn't do anything in the code base that was apart from reading it, so answering the questions and reading the code base. And then after 6 months I started to do my first feature for React Query, the first bigger one, which actually was what was that? The first feature that I made was the tracked queries. So that's this where notify on change props can actually, like, we can track what you're using, and then we're only re-rendering what if you're using one of the properties changes that you're actually using. So if you're not using the isFetching property, your component doesn't re-render on a background refetch. And this was, I think it's pretty cool, and it's kind of a big deal when it comes to rendering performance, even though I often say you don't have to worry about re-renderings. The first thing I did was a re-rendering improvement. I know this is a bit at odds, but I still, like, I think a library still has to be very much focused on this, and still has to keep all the cases in mind that users might actually use it for. As an app developer, when you write an app, you don't have to optimize re-renders like that much as when you are writing a library, I think. Yes, I think I know about vtest. It's pretty cool. The last time I tried it out, it still needed a dependency on vt. So I don't know how much right now they are together, like the bundler itself plus the testing library. But we use, I think we use vt for all of our examples now. Let me just double check the examples folder. Yeah, we use vt for all of our examples now. That was from all the different versions of Create React App or what we have. So we're using this. I think we can also think about switching the test runner. It is the slowest thing, but running them all in parallel takes like a minute or something. And what we also have a PR for right now is turborepo, which I think will also speed up, especially locally with the caching. And if we do remote caching, it will also speed it up for CI a lot. But the main thing that it will do for us is, if you only change something in the view query part, for example, you don't need to run the React tests, right? And if you change something in the core, you need to run all the tests. But if you change something in like one of the adapters, or if you change something in the sync storage persistor, for example, then why would you need to run like the solid query test if you change something in the persistor? So all of these packages in the monorepo are set up in a way that they all have their own like test command. And then on the top level, as you've probably seen, we are just streaming it. Oops, that's the terminal, here it is. So we're just streaming it down with PnPM at the moment. So it runs the tests like against 11 of the workspaces, and then it just runs them all in parallel. And with turborepo, you can actually trim this down to only run the ones that are needed. And I think this is something I'm looking with a bit of excitement towards. It is a piece. Yeah, I always like improving the tech that we play with as well. So yeah, if you want to, like, if someone wants to like drop a PR that replaces Jest with vtest, I'm all for it. Let's do it. Okay, I realize it's been half an hour and I haven't written a single line of code. So let me take a sip of water and then let's get started. Okay. So we have to go into the query cache. And then I think the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the queries, and then we're going to make the queries map. I would just make it a map of string and query. So that's the first thing. I would keep it queries map. We can rename it later. And then like the query hash map is something we don't need, because that's just the type definition for what we had right now. Okay. Then we have this dot queries, doesn't exist anymore, and then the queries map is a new map like this with nothing in it. Okay, that's like the first part. Now everything's red, obviously. So I'm gonna try to fix that one by one. Add. If we're adding it, I think all we would need to do is this dot queries map dot and then set, and then query dot query hash and the query. GitHub Copilot writes half the code for me anyways, so and we don't need the push, we don't need the assignment to the map. And then we still have the notify, and what the notify does is it's notifying the cache level subscribers about the event. So the cache level subscribers are all the listeners that we have, and you can subscribe to the query cache directly. It's not something that you usually do, but you're going to do this with like you like query client.getQueryCache.subscribe. You can subscribe to events on the query cache, and the query cache notify events, they kind of consist of like something, a query has been added, removed, updated, an observer has been added, and so on and so on. And one of the pieces of tech that actually does this is the DevTools. So when we look at the DevTools, I think somewhere in the DevTools we would need to find a query DevTools. Here it is. So somewhere in here there must be a subscribe to query cache, exactly. And there we have query cache.subscribe. And that means that the DevTools basically are kind of subscribed to everything that happens in the cache and everything that happens for a query. So whenever an observer is added, whenever a query is removed, whenever a query data has changed or something, the DevTools are notified by it and re-render and just always show like the actual state of the query. So this has nothing to do with like the observers that you create when you call use query. This is just something very internal that you can also use if you want. So there are a bunch of events, but this will like fire a lot probably, which is also why we have this kind of batching in place, at least in the DevTools, where we are batching the calls together to this onStore change. But this is usually not something that you do as a consumer. It's totally different. So yeah, this if needs to be fixed, obviously. At first I thought we don't need that if, because you can just call set, and if it exists, it doesn't do anything. But then we don't know when to fire this event, right? So we still need the, like we can do has, and then query. So if it's not in there, then we're setting it and we're notifying it. Okay, that looks fine. It's also like shorter to what we had before, I think. Perfect. Okay, remove. Next thing. This function, so just from reading it, I wouldn't have expected the function to be implemented the way it is implemented. So we're looking up the query in the map. And if it's not in the map, we do nothing. Okay, this is probably a safeguard of some sorts. Then we call query.destroy, and query.destroy basically cancels any ongoing queries if there are any, and it clears some timeouts as well. We need to do that in any case when we remove it. Then we filter it out from the list, and then we only conditionally delete it from the map. And that's the thing that I don't really understand. And it's so interesting that I see the stream to my right and it's so far behind. So weird. But okay, I'm just not gonna look to the right anymore. So if we just keep everything as it is, implementation-wise, I'm sure there's a good reason for this. Like, I can try removing this if statement, right? Like, because I think it should just be like this, and then we wouldn't need to look this up, but I'm 99% certain I did try this once, and lots of tests blew up in my, or a couple of tests blew up in my face. So for now, I'm just going to keep it. This is maybe for another time. So query in map is like queries map dot, you can just do dot has again, and then query hash. And then if it's in the map, we destroy it. The filtering probably goes away. And then if query in map triple equals query, this boolean and query, this is dot get, right? Okay, cool. So we just get it, and if this is something that's defined, that's not undefined, we destroy it. Yeah, git blame. Probably lots of me in here. No, it isn't. Yeah, that's the thing. See, that's not this is like, that's with the whole squashing comes in. So if you look at most of the code that we have, it just says version 3. Like, we were working on a big branch, and then like this was the version 3. So somewhere in version 3 it happened. This is like one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of squashing. But I think I've read somewhere that you should never squash like these long running branches. And I think I'm not going to do this again for version 5. So squashing is fine if you have like just a fix or a feature that goes directly to the main branch, and you just want to squash in a couple of commits and just let everyone, like, you define the commit message, and we also use conventional commits, so I need them to be in the right format, and I can control that, and that's perfect. But for long running branches like the alpha and beta and the version 5 branch that we have now, I'm probably not gonna, I'm just gonna merge them, I think, because we are squashing when we merge into the version 5 branch, because I want to avoid this, because now the git blame, or looking at it, it's just, even like I wrote lots of, but we have the same with version 4 somewhere. There's like, and the commit is so big that my editor often freezes when I try to annotate with something that was done in version 4. So I'm not gonna do this again with version 5. So yeah, this code part here is a bit older. So let's do, we get it. If we get it, we destroy it. And if it's still the same, whatever, then we are going to delete it from the map. Okay. Cool. So for clear, this is where things get interesting. Here we have a batching, and we iterate over the queries that this used to be the array. And then we call this.remove, and then this.remove removes each one of them. Okay. So we can't just clear them all in order, or we can't just clear the map at once, because we need to call query.destroy on every one of them. And we need to call like the notify event that things got removed, that each query got removed. The question is, can we do this while we are deleting the map? I think we can. So what we would need is this.query queries map dot values, and then maybe this. So we just get the values, we for each over the values, like we get the values once and we for each over it, and then we remove it. Yeah, this looks ugly. Thank you, Prettier. Okay, const queries equals this, and then like this. So we get the values once into an array, and then we can for each and remove over it, and in remove we just alter the map, and then the map is empty at the end of the day. I think this should work. Okay. Cool. Get is the next candidate. So what this does is it turns this to queries map. Okay, this should be straightforward because this is just a get on the map. Yeah, okay. Thought as much, because how did this work before? The queries map is actually, the query is of type unknown, like it says for generics, and it is of type unknown, unknown, unknown query key. And here we want actually a strictly typed something. So how did this work before? Like here we just say queries map. Let me just quickly look this up, what the queries map had in terms of typings. Oh, it was a query of any. That was sneaky. Okay, cool. Let me just see if I'm going to do this here as well, like with any, bunch of any's. And then like here as well. And then this error should disappear. But it doesn't. Okay, queries map string of query any. And then queries map. Oh. .get query hash. Okay, cool. I thought I changed this already. Yeah, so now it works. I don't really like this. I mean, I don't mind internals being any. Like if I search for any in the code base, there's probably a million of them. And this is fine. Like the boundaries of TanStack query are pretty well. So there's another way to do this, obviously. So we can go back to like here and keep these any's out, like no any's. And then the query defaults to unknown, like it's unknown something. If you take a look here, it's like unknown query key, which is a bit better because it's a bit more confined to work with. You can't do much wrong with unknown. And then what we would do here is we would just do .get, and then we would do like, yeah, a type assertion here as this. And I think I like this a bit better because it kind of shows you where you're cheating a bit. And there's actually a typo here. That should be query key. Okay. Query key. Okay. That's just another small thing. So yeah, this is one of the things that I also talked about in the last podcast that I was on. When you do like query cache, or like query client.get query data, and then you do like query data, and then you do something like to-dos. Yeah, to-dos one, whatever. We actually have no way of knowing what this data is, like what shape that data is. Because the definitions of the queries are not upfront, they are ad hoc. So whenever you call use query, you are creating, with the query function, you're creating that query on the fly. So when you look at the whole query cache, that's the reason why everything is either any or unknown. We don't know what is in there. So what we could do, obviously, is just give this back to you and say, okay, well, here's a query, it's unknown, we don't know what's in there, right? But you as a developer, you probably know what is in there, which is why, I mean, you can also use tRPC, that does it a lot better because there you have the upfront definition on the server, right? So there you don't have to worry about any of this. But here, what you can do is you would do something like this. You would do like to do. So here we provide generic, okay, I know that in my query key with to-dos one, there is something in there of type to do. And then obviously we would add the or undefined to it, like we do. But we would still need to like lie about the types a little bit. And that's either because internally everything is any, and we just kind of coerce it to the type that you are providing here. Or we kind of do a type assertion, which is pretty much the same thing from a boundaries perspective. So that's the reason why we have to do either this or an any. And yep, I also think the as is a bit better. Okay. Just take another sip of water. Cool. Get all will be the next one. So we're down to like only a couple of red squiggles. Get all would be this dot queries map dot values, and then again this one. I think query kit infers the types for you. I think we do have this in the oh, it's from our docs, yeah. Yeah, it does. Okay, yes, it does. It does infer the types, but you have to provide them here. So it's kind of the same thing. There's one point in time where you have to provide the types, and here it basically wraps this in a function that then kind of ties query function and get query data and kind of like has the get key, and I think it also has like it what it does is it wraps all the little functions that we have where you would have to provide the types every time, like every time you do get query data, you just need to wrap them once here, but you have to annotate them at one point in time. There is no way around this. And this is basically what, if you go back to my previous example, what you could also do just with a custom hook. You could do a custom hook that says, you know, use my query, and then it returns not only the query, but it returns a getter and a setter, and this is just the type one, and there you have the type, and then you would only need to pass the type to one of the things. And I think this is pretty much what create query does. Not saying it's not a good approach. I think it's a pretty good approach, because it gives you like this one-stop shop of where you need to define your things, and then you don't need to worry about the typings everywhere in your app. Because every time you do query client.get query data, you need to, or maybe even set query data, right? Because with get query data, you know that you need to do something, because what happens is that if you don't provide the generic, you just get unknown back. And if you get unknown back, you can't do anything with it. So you know, oh, now I need to do something and just set the type correctly. But with set query data, it's different, because with set query data, you just pass the key and the value. And then if you pass the value in and it's wrong from the typings, well, then nobody checks it for you. So every time you call set query data, you actually should provide the generic, which makes me think that maybe we should remove the default value of unknown or something. I don't know. That's a different discussion probably. But this kind of takes it away from you, like this decision, or that you have to memorize it because you just provide it once and then you get typed functions out of it. Pretty similar to a TRPC way you define it on the backend. Yep, you get it, the problem. Okay, cool. A question answered before I got a chance to answer it. Okay. Yep. Keeping typings consistent between backend and frontend, that's what TRPC would do. So this is just frontend stuff. You just call on the frontend, and if you like, you know, I love TRPC, so if you, it's built on TanStack query, so if you want typings to like flow from the backend to the frontend, this is where you should look at to keep that consistency. Could you not do an extra function call so that you could infer the response and then pass it into the create query internally, wrapped create query? I don't know if this is a question for TanStack query itself or create query, because this is a community library, so this is not something that we have internally. I also don't think we want to go any further with what the library provides, because there are so many other libraries already on top of it that try to solve this problem. So there's also the query key factory, there's React Query Kit, there is Zodios, which does a very good job at combining Axios plus React Query, also with a potential backend on top of it. And then there's obviously TRPC. So I don't think we are going to do much in this regard in the library internally, unless we take one of those packages and maybe publish them under the TanStack umbrella. But I'm not sure if that's something we're going to do anytime soon. So it's like every library, and I've just seen this with the ESLint plugin that we have. Every library that we take into our monorepo means we also have to maintain it. So now I'm getting like bug reports and questions about like the ESLint plugin that I know nothing about. So it's kind of like, I'm very happy that the original author of the ESLint plugin is still around and kind of helps us. Same with use queries and the typings. If you haven't seen the typings for use queries, they're insane, I think. So this was made by a TypeScript wizard who made the typings for use queries. And every time something doesn't work in here, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? So I merged the PR thinking, yay, now we have good typings for use queries and we also have tests for those types, which is amazing. But just, having to fix a bug in here, this is kind of above my pay grade, I have to say. I need to take like Matt's course or something for this for me to comprehend. But yeah, same goes for the ESLint plugin. So I don't know too much about it. So I have to be a bit more careful about the things that we take into the TanStack query library in general. But I'm always happy to, learn all these things. Just reading along. Oh, thank you. A ton of libraries, not a good thing. I try to get out of the trap. Yeah. Well, that's the thing about React. It doesn't do anything apart from rendering and minimal state management. It doesn't do much. So you need a router. You need server-side rendering. You need a framework basically around React. I'm not sure it's a trap. It might look like it if you look at package.json and you have like a million dependencies. I also don't know how to get out of this. And also this update cycle. Like every month or quarter or whatever, you update dependencies and hope nothing breaks, and something always does. I don't know. Maybe we should use Angular. Do they also have that many dependencies? I don't know. I think they have more like out of the box. But yeah, it's a different trade-off for sure. Yeah, I agree with Moshi on it's Moshi Fawn. I don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe you need to maybe you should tell me your real name, because I think we should be on a first name basis. All right. Let's try to get let me try to get on with this here. So what I've actually just realized is that I've written this before, and it's actually here. So how about we just do this.getAll for each. Yeah, because this is now pretty much the same. So getAll gives us a query array, and we just take the values of the map. I think that's better. Yeah, again, question about the IDE. This is IntelliJ, the new one with the beta looks. So this is when you appearance and behavior. There's this new UI. It's the beta work in progress something UI. I'm not going to switch back because I love it. So yeah, I've been using IntelliJ for almost 10 years. I know you have to pay for it, but it's not that much, and I love it. Yeah, it's from JetBrains, exactly. Okay, I think 4 more red squiggles to go. Find. The find method on the query cache takes a bunch of stuff and then does queries.find. So we try to find all the queries that match certain filters. And then, oh, we're trying to find the first one. We only try to find one of them. Okay, that's why we always have filters.exact set to true. So yeah, I think this is also just this.getAll.find. Okay, but what the? Again with the typings. Okay, cool. So now we have query. This is unknown query key, and then match query, something, and then we do the same trick, I would say. Trick as in type assertion. Yeah, that's still better than any. Let's hope there are not too many of those boundaries that we need to cross. Otherwise, I just revert this back to any. Sorry. Because find all might actually have, oh no, find all is cool because find all only returns a query array. This is not typed, because with find all you can find you can actually type find all, because you can say give me all the active queries or give me all the stale queries. And then like you can't say like query of to-dos, like you could get multiple things with this. This is only possible for the things that find one thing, where you can pass the generics. Here we've just left them out completely, which is why we can just do const queries equals this dot nope, this dot get all, and then we do if we have filters, we do queries, otherwise queries. And then here we shouldn't need the TypeScript is fine with this because this is also unknown something. Okay. 2 to go. They're pretty much the same. It's the on-focus event and the on-online event, which is the events that we get from the focus manager and the online manager that kind of track if you're if the editor gets the focus or if you are online or offline. And here again, all we need to do is this dot get all dot for each, and then I think TypeScript is done. I do not have a bot. You mean a bot in Twitch? This is the first time I'm using this platform. I'm happy I set it up. I just clicked the start streaming button and somehow this works. I'm so impressed. But if you know there's some bots that I should set up on this, hit me up on Twitter, please, either publicly or with a DM. I would be happy to make this better. All right, so there's nothing red in here anymore. The question is, should I try to run the tests again? Because last time I did this, I kind of the stream got stuck for a second. Let me see. Let's do one thing, because I think the only tests that matter are those of the query core. So let's just take the tests from the query core and run those. This shouldn't be that many. I'm dropping again. I haven't started the tests yet. No, this is not me. Okay. Right. I am going to run the tests once for the query core package, because the query cache lives in the core, and all of them, if they are good, then we are good. Okay. There you go. Sorry if I'm gone again, but I need to run the tests. Ooh, there's an error. Ooh, okay, cool. Not cool. Query.destroy is not a function. So 2 tests have failed. This is fine. Well, I didn't expect it, but so now I can see the tests that have. Oh, the tests are failing because, yeah, haha. I forgot that. So we sometimes have tests that actually like override or like access private stuff, which will no longer work if we move towards private fields. But this is a different PR, so not the problem at the moment. So we need .get, like we just need to access this. It's just a future problem. Query cache, so let's just do .get queries, and then we do .get r. Oh, actually this is like what query cache this is a public thing, so we can just, I don't know, well, okay. I have not written these tests. We get with the, okay. Should not try to add a query already added to the cache. Query cache. Queries map, and then .get hash. Oh, delete. That's an okay. Remove? No, delete. Okay. Is this test running now? Yep, that's a green test. Okay. Fair enough. And then the same thing here. So here we have get, and then hash, and then as query, and then dot delete. I will revisit these tests if we do the size improvements issue, because accessing private things only works because they're not really private. Yep. This is my future problem, or maybe it's not my problem, but at least I know about it now, and we can tackle this later. Okay, let's run all the tests of the query core again and see what's going on. Green. All right, that wasn't too bad. I'm really happy about the code coverage that we have. The query core is like over 90%. It used to be a bit higher, but there's like really a diminishing returns on things that you test, like all the branches that you test. It's the same like with this test. What we're actually testing with this test is if this if branch in here is tested correctly. But in like this, if you're calling add 2 times, you just check if it's not there. But in order to get there, you have to actually like mess with the internals a little bit. I don't know. Not a big fan of this test. All right. The thing is green. But that was just the refactors. Let me just commit that the way it is. I think this is good enough. All right, cool. Let's just do feature query cache. Oh, it's actually core. Oh, it's actually refactoring. We haven't done the feature yet. It's refactor core. What did we do? Use a map internally instead of an object plus an array. Okay, cool. So this was nice. So now we have basically only the queries map, and we could rename this to maybe just queries. I don't know. Query and then queries map. Why does it have? Yeah, I don't like that it has map in the name. Let's just do this. All right. Because map is type information that we have now. Maybe it used to be necessary before. Anyways, let's just amend that. Okay. So the next thing, the actual feature, would be to pass in a custom like map from the outside. And this shouldn't be too hard now that we have this. And then it's about writing tests for the new feature, which is also something that we should probably be doing. We don't want to lower the test coverage because of this. So it all starts with the query client. It doesn't start. It starts with the query client, but I don't think there's anything we need to do in the query client, because the query client either gets like nothing or a query cache. And once it gets a query cache, you need to actually provide this to the query cache. This is what we've kind of said here. So it just is new query cache, and then it needs to get a cache or a cache function as a parameter into this. So the query cache constructor gets a query cache config, and the query cache config is where the magic needs to happen. So here we already have 2 optional parameters, on error and on success. These are the cache global callbacks for queries that are actually very useful, as opposed to the callbacks on use query, which are not very useful, I think. I don't know why you would use the callbacks on use query. You should be using the callbacks on the query cache, because the callbacks on use query are called for every use query instance. So they are not very useful to display error toasts. They are not very useful to do logging. They are not very useful to sync state to local state, which you shouldn't be doing anyways. But even that, they are not very useful because they don't account for data only being read from the cache. So whatever you do, I don't know. I've never really seen like for mutations, yes, but not for queries. I don't know, and I've kind of if you use it and have a legit use case, let me know, because I don't think the callbacks on success and on error and on settled on use query are actually useful. They are just a little bit better than use effect, because that's what they are. They're kind of per component, per observer, use effects that run after your query runs, but not when you read query from the cache. So when you have a stale time set and you switch between query keys and you only read it from the cache without a background refetch, they won't fire. So I don't know why they are any good. I'm not using them. I'm using these. They are really good because they are always executed once for each query. So when you really have an error in your query and you want to show a toast message or you want to log it to Sentry or whatever, use this one. That's a lot better. Yeah, if you use them to display error toasts, what happens is that if you have like use query used twice, you get 2 error toasts because it's kind of like a use effect on a component. So yeah, if you only use it once, like use to-dos, and that gives you the list, and then you distribute the data differently with prop drilling, or you just have one screen where you use it, I think it works coincidentally because you only have it once, so it works. But yeah, if you're using the observer callbacks, if you use the cache callback, that's totally fine. So here we're going to add a new one. So here we're going to add a new one that's going to be, I'm still not sure how to name it. I think it's weird to call it like new query cache and then you pass a cache into the query cache. Like what's that supposed to be? A cache in a cache? Is that, I don't know. But like cache provider, we already have a query client provider, and then you create a cache, and then the cache also has a provider. That also sounds confusing to me. I don't know. Maybe drop some name suggestions in the chat or something. I'm just gonna go with what we have here. So we're gonna go with maybe create cache. I do want this to be a function, so it has to be optional, and I do want it to be a function. And it doesn't get anything. I think the function is really nice because you would most likely want it to be a function. And then maybe provide cache. We can see about that. And then it returns, it doesn't return a query cache. It has to return either a map of string or query. We can go with that. But I'm not really sure if it should be a map or if it should only be like a map-like interface. Because a map from the type definition, has like lots of things. And we don't need that many things. And if we take a look at what SWR does, is they have a very minimal interface of what you can provide. And what you can, I think it was at the very top. Yeah, what you can provide is it needs like a get, a set, a delete, and a keys method. And I think what we are using, like what are we using on the queries? Like this dot queries dot, we're using has and set and get and delete and values. We don't use keys, we use values. We could use keys and then iterate over the keys, but why should we? I don't know. The thing is, if we now restrict ourselves to a certain type and we want to read the size later internally for something, then we can't because we use a map, but if our interface doesn't have size, so then we can't use it. So in order to not constrain ourselves, I'm just going to say it has to be a map. And if we want it to be like a smaller interface, then we can just narrow the type because it's still compatible with a map. This will be the non-breaking change. The breaking change is to start out with a small interface and then say, oh, by the way, now your create cache function needs to return something that also has a size attribute, that also has a keys iterator, stuff like that. That would be the breaking stuff. So that's not what we're doing. We're just going to use like what we use internally. And then we can say up here, this returns a map of string or query if you provide it. I think this is the safer method, at least for us. And then in the constructor, we have the config, and we're going to do the queries is config dot create cache question mark new map, kind of possibly undefined. Okay, another question mark dot, and then this. And I'm so happy that this won't produce like 5 lines of code after we've shipped the size improvements, but it will literally just stay like this. Question mark dot create cache, question mark dot invoke the function, fallback if this is undefined or null to a new map. And this is the feature, I guess. This is like all there is. Let's write a test, I would say. Store is a good name. Yes, I think so. It would be a store. Yeah, I like store. I mean, we have the storage persisters. Let me just see if that. I need to fix that this Algolia search dialog is in light mode. Like even though I'm using dark mode, I wanted to fix this for like forever. If you want to fix that, it's in the TanStack.com. TanStack and then TanStack.com repository somewhere in here. If you want to fix that. What? Yeah, there it is. Okay. That's where the documentation page lies for everything TanStack related. So you would also fix it for other TanStack libraries like TanStack table. Okay, let me just see storage. So we have the sync storage persister that says you want to sync it to an external storage. I think that's the, because it's local storage and session storage, but that's storage, that's not store. So I do kind of like store, or maybe just cache. Yeah. A cache has a store, maybe. I don't know. I like it. I guess. Let's see. We don't have to merge this today. Sure, I love it too. So let's do, this is feature core. Allow users to provide a custom cache creator function. Okay, so let's see query cache.test in the query core. That's where, oh, there are still some, oh, that was my refactoring. Damn, see, those were not refactored, it's now queries. Okay, I need to amend that afterwards. So those are the fixed tests, because I renamed it and apparently it doesn't rename the annexes like this. All right, so how is this test structured? We have a describe query cache, and then we have subscribe, and then we have find, and then we have find all, and then we have on error, on success, and add. Okay, so let's do describe, and then let's do query cache config. What is on stale? Nothing. We've called it, we have now called it create cache. Okay. And And what we're going to do in this is we are going to do const query cache equals new. Or how are the other tests written? Actually, let's take a look. We create a query key, we create a stub function, we create a cache, we create a client with that cache, and then we call a fetch function that actually fills the cache, and then we just see if it's there and if onSuccess has been called. Okay, that's a pretty good test. Just gonna copy paste this. So query key, we don't have onSuccess, and I don't want to have like a stub function for the creation because, well, what do we want to test? We want to test if the function has been called. It could be a stub with like mock implementation, like new map. This would work. Is this what we want? This would be like create cache. And then we create a query client with that cache, and then we, oh, this needs to be async. And then, no, actually, okay, the fact that the create cache function is invoked doesn't mean anything. It just means that the function has been called. It doesn't mean that we're calling the getter and the setter on the new map, like the thing that's returned here. But let's just see if that, I mean, this should obviously work. So we don't even need to like prefetch something, or we don't even need a test client. We can just expect create cache to have been called, right? I think this would be like, oh my God, it's Theo. Here is this, the Theo, hey. Cool. Yeah, good to see you, man. Thanks for dropping by. I'm not gonna do much longer. I'm just going to finish up these tests. Let's just see if this actually works. It doesn't, obviously. What does that mean? Returning a promise from the scribe is not supported. Okay. Oh, I'm missing the test. Huh, okay. Test, that's stupid. Should call create cache. And this one is actually async, not the other one. Okay. Well, there you go. Okay. Let's rerun this. And I didn't remove the async. Obviously, it still returns a promise. Okay, cool. This works, obviously, but it doesn't test much. So this could be like the first simple test that we do. Like, is this function invoked if we pass it in? That's fine. New query cache, we just discard the result. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So, and then we don't need this. Okay, so this is like the most basic test that we can see if the function is called, like in here. And then we assign it to the queries and it's basically test. I mean, there isn't much to test. If you've seen like most of the code that we've written was the refactoring. And like the feature is really just this. But I still don't know if it works. So I wanna like, I'm not so sure. I want to just add another test that actually does something with it. So how about we don't do a function, we just do like a real function. And this function is going to do something like const cache is map, and then we're going to return, whoops, what was that? Misclick. We're going to return the cache, and then we're going to call like get, and we're just going to return a static value from the cache, like, I don't know, 5. Just want to see if this cache is actually used. And then we actually have, yeah, and then we want to Type number is not assigned. Return types by get are incompatible. Okay, so what does this actually have? Okay, now we're getting into types land. So this has to be query. Here we have like the. Here we are now in this query. This actually needs to be query any, I guess. Right? Is that where we're heading towards? Oh, we need to return a query. That's it. Yeah, we need to this. Okay, that's. I'm not sure if that is needed. Let's just sit on that for a second. So we don't return a value. We actually return a query. So we need to return a query that. Let me just think for a second. If this is really if this test makes any sense. So what could we I can't just create a query, like a new query, can I? Like the getter with the query key and everything returns the same query. This is like, I need the whole config. It also needs the cache. Nah, this is going into weird directions. I don't know what a good test would be for this actually. So we'd want to check if the getter has been called. Maybe an empty query. Yeah, there is no such thing as an empty query. I just say let's just do what Copilot suggests. Let's just hook into the getter and see that this. I could spy on map.get, and this is pretty much what I'm doing, I think. So I'm going to do this, and then we're going to do we could. Yeah, I could jest.spy on cache.get. How does this work with the spy? I think we have some spy on, it's called. Okay, cool. And then what do you need there? An object in the method. Okay, so it's cache and then get. And then what? And then dot mock implementation, but then you would also no, what I just want is like I'm going to do just something like let me just try this. Let me just increment the count every time we call get. And just see how often get is called when we okay, let. I need let here. And then we just return the get, and it returns the results and the query cache, and then we don't need this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a query client like we did above. Right, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. I want to do a query client. And then we want to do the cache is const test cache, and then we're going to do query client.get query data for the key, and then we're going to like expect count to be 1. Oh, there I need test client. Okay. So we're going to get the data. This should get us into the cache. This should call our custom cache and not the internal cache. And let's just see if that works. It could also not work. Yep. This .queries.values is not a function. Is this because I made this like with this syntax here? Does this kind of break it? I don't know. Let me just see what happens if I do this. If I just return the cache as it is. Yeah, then it works, but the count is obviously 0 because we haven't hooked into the getter. Okay. So how do I create a new map, because map like cache.values exists. So why doesn't this, can I just reassign cache.get? Is that like possible? I don't know. And then return cache, is that? Yeah, it's a shell copy. Let's just see if that works. No, count is still 0. Oh. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Huh. Let me just see what you've all written here. In the constructor, in constructor config, query config, that's okay. Let me just see what that means. So you mean the constructor query config? Yeah, that's right. So what we could do is, but that's a different kind of refactoring, right? So we could do this, and then we could do this, and then we could do config.create cache. Yeah, that's a good call out. I think we could use like default values more in the constructor. Not sure why we're not doing this more often. To use Spyon, you would need to hoist the new map creation. Also, question, yeah, I guess so too. But why can't I? This is what I wonder. Is a map, like, is a map more than an object? Probably it's a class, right? So in a class, you can't just shallow copy and then do something with the get. I don't know. That's interesting. I just wanted to do, because that would actually make the whole API, because how would you work with an API that wants you to pass in a map, but you want like a map and you want to control the getter and the setter? Because if you're returning, like, maybe you need a subclass of a map or something. That would be weird. Can you subclass a map? No, count can be a let. I think that should work. That probably isn't the issue. Because what I thought is that this would work, right? So you just have a cache. Why doesn't this work? And then you define get on it. Because from the typings this works, and then this should be called. Like, we can also console log if this is called, right? So we can, if it's about the count, then we can log this, but I don't think it is. Yeah, so we can actually see that this is never called or logged. Count to be 1, and then we can actually debug it. Object assign, let's try that. I think that's a good one. But isn't return object.assign cache, and then let's do the whole get thing with these 3 lines. Let's try this one. Otherwise, I'm just going to debug into it, because why not? It doesn't get called. Okay. Never call the get method in the code block. Well, I call get in, so this could be it. So we call client.getQueryData, and getQueryData goes into queryCache.find. And queryCache.find, oh, maybe that's it, I'm just stupid. It calls getAll, and getAll just calls the values. We never call the get, just because we call getQueryData doesn't mean we actually call get on this thing. Okay. So we call values. Brilliant. Cool. Let's try this. Let's try values. Result is cache.value what was this? Values. And then, oh, that was brilliant. Okay, let's see if that works. No, because it actually, now it calls itself indefinitely. Okay, so let's try it with this approach. And then values, cache.values. And now we're green. Okay, so that was just, I thought that this should work. And now it's just me not getting, see what I did there? Me not getting that we're not actually calling cache.get, because where are we calling cache.get or like queries.get? Only for remove and for there's an internal get function, but the get query data, I think that's the I think that's the actual thing. Like, why am I creating a query client just to call get query? Like, this is an extra indirection. This is so stupid here. I'm not gonna do this. I'm just gonna do like test cache.get key, and then we need like a string. Okay, well, key, whatever, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to exist. And then we can actually like do this with get. Hey, good to see you. You're just in for some test fun. Okay, so, and this would be like get, and this would, I mean, you can also leave it like we had it, but this would be like hash string. And then we have cache.get hash, and then return result. And then like this is totally unnecessary. And then we return this, and then we create a cache, and then we say test cache.get, and this would actually forward to this .queries.get. Yeah. And then this should also be green. Yeah, okay. So now we call this function. Not sure if this, now it actually does, it reads weird because we override get here, and we think that we, like, there's create cache and there's test cache and then there's get. Let's just inline this, maybe then it doesn't look so weird. .get key, and then we expect the count to be 1 because we're actually calling the get of that cache. If we don't pass create cache, obviously this will fail, but yeah, then we don't have the count. Okay, I think that's good enough for a test that tests if we pass a map to an internal structure, because if one of them is called, all of them are called. You actually want to mock and has been called. Yes, I do, but then that is correct. I do want that, but that would mean we would need to hoist the map out of the create cache. I mean, we can also do that. I don't mind. So then we have the cache in here, and then we would need to like jest.spy on cache, and then get, and then yeah, this returns the, like, this returns the const I don't know, spy, or what is this? This is the spy instance. Yeah, how do we usually call this? Spy on. Do we have this? We call it spy. Okay, cool. So then this would all need to be like moved out, I guess, and then we have the spy on the get, and then create cache just returns the and then create cache just returns the cache, right? And then we don't have this, and then we have expect spy to have been called ×1. I think that's how it works. Yeah, okay. Maybe that reads a bit better. I can also inline this. yeah, we just create it outside, and then we have a function that gives it to us, and we spy on the getter. Yeah, that's good. And that's no longer like should call create cache. This is should work with cache. I don't know. What does it do? It makes sure that we should assign created cache to should use created cache. That's what it does. It uses the cache. Okay. So now they're both green, I guess. And that's it. We have a bunch of tests. Yeah, I was fumbling a bit here actually. It's like in the end of the day, it's 4 lines of code, and in between it was like, I don't know, 20 lines of code and lots of I don't know what I'm doing. But I think maybe you can relate to this. This is how it goes sometimes. You just don't know. I was ready to debug into this just to. Thankfully, someone in the chat, I think it was Dr. Attitude, said that it doesn't get called. We're just not calling it. Yeah, that's how it goes. Okay, let me commit that, and there we have this little change. So let me just see if that is like really the same up here. So we have, it's now a required argument, but we have a default assignment, and when you have a default assignment, and it's actually a still an optional one. And then we just do like, why do we even have, oh, we assign it to this .config. Okay, so we have to store it, and then we have config.create cache. Yeah, this looks perfectly fine. Thank you for that, pointing that out. Okay, so we now have test core, add tests for custom query cache. Okay, I am on a feature branch already that I can now push. There's the window. Those are the things we did. Yep, I'm gonna push that. And then we can even start create a PR maybe, because I think this feature is done. Test the query, there it is. Let's create one, and it goes to the version 5 branch. And then it's feature custom cache. Let's have another look what we did. There's the create cache function. There's the constructor refactoring. There's a bit more stuff. Then all of those like filtering of the queries, all this went away. I think it must be like in the negative, except that we added tests. So the tests kind of gave it away probably, that we are now in the positive. Yeah, it's 47 additions and 32 deletions. But if you take a look at the bunch of tests that we've written, this is actually a good outcome. So let's do that. Let's wait for the pipeline to complete. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll play around a bit in the code sandbox preview environment once we have it. I still don't know what the best feature would be to use this for. On a constructor, I declared a param with a prefix public. You don't need to double declare it and don't need to assign it to this. I did not know that. What does that mean? Why public? What does public mean? Help me out with that. Or send me a link to a, what do you mean, like public config? Like this? No. Like this? I don't. On a constructor, I declare a parameter. Or is it just like this? This? No. Oh, and now it says duplicate identifier config. That's the issue. Ah. Oh, that's neat. So now I don't need to do this, and now I don't need to do this. Huh. That's, yeah. No, I did not know that. See? I do so little work with classes in TypeScript. I use a bunch of them in Java and Scala or Kotlin when I'm doing JVM backend development. But Scala has case classes, so it's different. That like it all works a bit different. This is pretty cool. Is this smaller when we transpile it? Because then I could just do this everywhere. Like if we take a look at all the constructors that we have, I think like a lot of them, I mean, lots of the things are private here. I don't think we have that many. Like, why is that even public? That's the first one. Maybe that's the better question. Like, why is the if it's private, does it work with private as well? Whoops. Apparently not. No. It doesn't work with private. You can construct. You can also do the same with private. Stream is a bit behind. Property config is declared, but its value is never read. Actually, what do we do with the config? Maybe that's the better question. We don't do anything with the config. Actually, I think we just this is so if we do public, it doesn't complain because everyone can use it. Or we can do the same with private, you say. Okay. So we can like change everything here to actually be like, I mean, a bunch of those things like config dot something. Oh, this is multiple options. Okay. Yeah, but it makes sense. We could do private here. But then TypeScript actually tells us we're never using this, which I didn't know because it was public. So, and also this one here, like, why would you need to access query cache.config? Yeah, exactly. It worked, but it didn't do anything. So let's just do that. Let's just do this. I think this is the most minimal thing we can do because we pass the config in. But what are we doing then with the rest of it? Like, what's with the on error and the on success? This has to go somewhere. This doesn't make any sense. Ah. We must get errors somewhere else now. Like, there must be cache.config.onError. See, there it's being read. That's why it's public. Because we read it from the query and then we call the on error of the config. Okay. Now, yeah, that makes much more sense now. Okay, cool. So back to public. And then that's it. All right. I still, and now this works again, right? Yeah, cache.config. Okay. So we don't just need it inside of here. We pass this around. And we could make getters or something, but I think this is fine. Let me just amend that. Use public constructor parameter. I think this is actually a cool thing. Okay, and then let's push that. Okay, so of course some PR checks are failing. Those are also going away. We have extra tests, like we run the test suite multiple times, once against React 18 and once against React 17. And I was actually pretty proud when we did that about how it's being done, because we pass in an environment variable that tells you if you have to do React 18 or React 17. And then is this interesting for you to see how this is done? Like how to use a different, how to use the same dependency in a different version in pipelines, because then I can quickly, because we're removing this from the library. I thought that this was, I only found like one article about this, and I think I also posted this on Twitter, and this was interesting to at least some of the followers I had back then, the way we were doing this. And I know the stream is a bit behind, so if you want to see how we're doing that, I can also quickly show this in the last 10 minutes, because this PR is pretty much done. I don't know why the tests are probably failing because they're flaky, and in CI everything runs in parallel, so there's that. There's always one test that fades. We need to rewrite them to be more yeah, we're just going to rerun this. Yeah, okay. Right, now I'm seeing the comments. This is like, I'm like 20 or 30 seconds behind. I don't know why. Is this normal on Twitch? I don't know. It feels a bit weird. Okay, so what we did was how to, yeah, now it's rerunning it. That's fine. So what we did was we go to package.json, and we are depending on two different versions of React and on testing library. And let's just stick with React and React DOM. So what we did is we have React in React 18 and React DOM as well. And then we have a dependency on React 17 and React DOM 17. So they are, like, they need to be different. You can't just write 70, but you can prefix them with an npm colon prefix, and then it just goes to npm as well. And this is just that it pulls in a different dependency, but now it's called React 17 and React DOM -17. So they now coexist, React 18 and 17, in your repository, and you would have to actually import like React from React -17, which is not what you'd want usually. You just want to import it from React. So if we take a look at any of our tests, like the use query tests from React query, obviously, this is the types test, sorry, this is the one. So we are importing it just normally as like React from React. And how does this work is because we have a jest setup function that actually mocks React and mocks React DOM and mocks testing library React. And what it does is it's going to read the process and React.js version, which is whatever you provide, or 18. And in our GitHub workflow, in the PR one, we are actually providing somewhere the React.js version 17. So if we are running the test for React 17, we are providing the React.js version variable 17. And then what this is doing is that we are spying, or we are mocking the actual React module and the import, and we are then calling jest.requireActual with the package of that version. So that means if the version number is 18, we are requiring the normal React, and if the package version is 17, we're actually, like, every time you call import React from React, we're actually requiring React 17. And that's how you get like the two different things, the two different versions of a library with like the same import. The import in your test is always React or React DOM, but here, depending on the environment variable, you're actually getting the version that you want to work with. And that works for most of the cases, except that React 17 and 18 have different APIs in some cases. Like there's like with hydration, it's different, or you need to import from React DOM/client. So with those things, it doesn't work well. But when the APIs are the same and you just want to test against different versions of a library, just to see if your tests still run with React 18 and React 17, which we needed to do because we use usync external store, and it has a shim that works differently for React 17 because the hook only exists in React 18 and onwards. So we wanted to run, like, we didn't want to break anything for React 17 users. So we we wrote this so that the tests run against React 18 and 17 at the same time in the pipeline, which I think is pretty nice. And it's like just a minimal setup. What I found weird is that you can't like move this outside. I just wanted to define this once, but then in a jest.mock factory function, you cannot use anything from the outside unless it has a weird prefix or something. You just get a runtime error if you do this, like in the tests. So I just stick to the duplication parts here. It's just 3 times the same thing, but it works, and we don't need it anymore. Yeah, you're right, Pavel, but like I said, we wanted to run it against both versions because we want to support both versions, and it should work with both versions. Yeah, libraries, it's probably a bit different. Okay, let's see what our PR is saying. Is it still okay? Maybe there's a real error that I haven't thought about. No, it's this use queries. I'm gonna note this test down because I've written this test and it's probably, I don't know, flaky. It's like flaky tests are. I'm just gonna note this somewhere that this is the test I want to look at next. We have like a bunch of flakiness reduction PRs in the last couple of times, where we try to reduce the flakiness, like some sleeps, but when you do async stuff, you want it to be as fast as possible, but then we also do lots of batching together and batching renders together, and then you can't really find out like, did it render the amount of times that I wanted it to render, or was it just batched together? So in some tests we do have some sleeps, but we don't want them to be too long. And this is usually where things get flaky. They work locally, and it started to get a lot worse in CI since we started to parallelize things with P and PM. So now all the tests run in parallel. They run super fast, but they also kind of then, I think the CI server doesn't have that many resources, so sometimes it kind of gets flaky. But it's good because it shows that the tests are flaky, right? If on my machine they always are green, and then in CI they are flaky. So we need to work on them and make them a bit more stable. But that's probably for a different session. Yep. I think it ran pretty fine when the tests ran like in serial. But now with PNPM, we're just streaming them all in parallel, and that's where, yeah. But I still like them to be faster than slower. And it's going to, yeah, control timers. I can show you like how the tests look. I mean, there's nothing to hide. If you take a look at use query, again, in the React query, the ones that are actually testing something. Yeah, so most of them are written like this. So they kind of get a query key, and then they define a page. And on this functional component, we call use query. And then we return something, and we return like the status of the query or whatever, something like that, which is pretty much what every consumer also does, right? You have a component and you have a query that you test. And then you'd like kind of you print the status, or you print the data, or you print the error or whatever. And then you render this, and then you wait for the status to be something, right? So just how things should look for the consumers. But then there are some tests where you have to like actually have a query function that needs to wait for a bit, especially if you run queries in parallel and you want the queries to be like one query triggers a render and then the second query also triggers a render. Because if both queries like resolve at the very same time, which they usually don't if you have asynchronous calls over the wire, but if the queries in the tests don't have like a sleep that's a bit different, they resolve at the very same time, then the batching that we are doing is actually batching them together in one render. And then you don't see like, would it render like once or would it render like two times, depending on when the query function actually resolves. So I think the batching that we're doing in here is like the render optimizations that we do are so good that sometimes in the tests, when we want to actually test how often something renders, we have to make the query function slower, or we have to make them a bit more apart from each other when they resolve. That's why we sometimes have these sleeps in here. Because if you have a query function that is actually enabled, like if you would take this example here, where the query function is a synchronous function that just returns data, and you say this is enabled true, you might not even get a render with a loading state. Like we would optimistically set it to loading state, but then because the function actually returns synchronously, we always wrap it in a promise. So there is like one promise tick where this actually is pending in that sense. But because it happens so fast, it's just one tick, and the batching that we do would kind of wait for that. And what could happen is that there is no, that with this, like with just a query function that looks like this, there could be, depending on your machine and depending on how the batching like actually works, it could be that there is no render cycle where your query is actually in loading state. But this is like not a real use case, because usually people don't use a query function where they return data synchronously, or even if you do like just async data, right? This is pretty much the same, that the function returns a promise of data, or you do something like a promise.resolve data. But what this does is still so fast that we might batch it together and you don't get a loading cycle. So if we want to test if the query actually goes into loading state and then into success state, we have to actually make that function slower. Yeah, that's pretty much the only reason, except for some legacy tests. And let me just see if I can find one of those. So here we already have like these. We're waiting for the tests. There are some, maybe those that return null. Yeah, so those are kind of the ones that we still need to rewrite, because I don't think they were very good. What they do is they render a function where we have like a use query, and then there's like a use effect that does some things, and then we render, and then we sleep for an arbitrary amount of time, which is probably way too long. Like it also makes the test slower. And then we just check if the states are correctly, and the states are captured by, you know, calling states.push, and states is just an array that lives outside of the test. And every time the function is re-rendered, we just capture the state of the re-renders. And then we just test if there have been 4 renders, and then if the renders were these specific things. But this is not actually something that our users would expect. Like this might be, like we have 1 or 2 of those tests that actually make sense, because we want to explicitly test how often something renders. But most of the tests don't do this. So these tests would be like, the flaky tests are always the tests that have something like this in it, and then we're expecting a certain length to be there. So you can, and they're always like return null, right? So there's nothing that is printed on the screen. Like this is not a real test. But so what you can do is you can just write them differently by actually returning something that you care about, and then asserting if that thing lives on the screen. And for most tests, it doesn't matter if the re-renders have been 4 times or 3 times, because some things were batched together. Maybe there is no loading state for the first query or something. Of course, there have to be a certain amount of tests that actually test the re-rendering behavior, but currently here, like all the tests test the re-rendering behavior. And that is not something that I think is worth doing, especially if it makes the tests flaky in some situations, unless you increase the timeout here for sleeping, which is not something that I want to do. Okay, that being said, I've talked through our tests being green. So it was indeed just flakiness that we need to look into. I want the tests to be like not flaky, obviously. That's the PR, if you want to give it a review or something. We can still discuss the naming, obviously. So create cache, it is at the moment. There's also no rush in this as long as we don't forget about it, because when we merge this, it goes into the version 5 branch. The version 5 branch is not automatically released. So the version 5 branch is just something that we're going to merge into until we make it like an alpha or beta branch. And then it's going to be released automatically with every push. Okay. That was all I wanted to cover. Also, time's up. It's pretty late for me. It's 10 p.m. in the evening now. My family is already asleep. The kids are also a bit sick, so it's going to be an interesting night, I'd say, for me. Yeah, that's all I had. I can still see that still 30 people are here. I would have never expected this. Thank you for the interest in yeah, what I'm doing, what I have been doing. Is there any question that I've missed that I can quickly answer? Let me just see. I think someone asked about like what keyboard and keyboard switches I'm using. I have a Keychron K70 keyboard, and I don't know what keyboard switches are. If I have to be honest, it's just a mechanical keyboard, and I think it sounds nice. It also sounds nice on this on the videos that I've made. Yeah, and I'm sorry that the stream is so far behind. I'm gonna ask Theo about this, what I can do the next time. Yeah, I also hope I'm going to stream some more. It says every Thursday. Maybe I'll do it again next week. At least that's what the schedule now says. If there are any issues left next week to take, I can take them. Otherwise, maybe I'll just rewrite some tests to be more stable or something. All right, that was it. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.